Today we're going to take a look at section 1.3, which are different properties of numbers. So there are several properties that we're going to take a look at. So the first four properties that we're going to take a look at are on this page. So the first one is reflexive, and it just means that a quantity equals itself. So kind of like your reflection in the mirror, you see yourself back. It's the same idea. So for example, it's like saying 6 is equal to 6. Or 4 plus 7 is equal to 4 plus 7. Okay, it has to be the same thing staring back at the other side. Symmetric is a little bit different. So symmetric is saying if I have something like 2 plus 6 equals 8, then it doesn't matter if I say 8 equals 2 plus 6. It's kind of like you're flopping the sides of the equation. So it's different than being reflexive, because reflexive is exactly the same side, is exactly the same on both sides. But symmetric is not. They're just equal to each other. The next one we have is transitive. And transitive always has three things in it. So it's like saying if 2 plus 3 equals 4 plus 1, and 4 plus 1 equals 5, since those two things are the same, that means that they must be equals. So then 2 plus 3 must also equal 5. Okay, so it's kind of like a little train is kind of how I think of transitive. Substitution is something that you've been doing. You've been doing this when you've been evaluating. So, for example, if they say if n is equal to 11, then 4 times n is equal to 4 times 11. Okay, so again, you're just substituting in. Here are our last four properties. So we have the identities, and what the identities do is that they keep the numbers the same. So when we're talking about all four of these properties, we're talking about addition and multiplication only. They don't hold true for subtraction or division. So, for example, the addition identity. So for addition, we want to keep the number the same. So you think, what do I add to 6 to keep it 6? Well, I add 0. So anytime you see a plus 0, then it's an identity. For multiplication, we don't multiply by 0 because that would give us 0. So we're going to think, what do I do to say 7 to keep it the same? Well, I multiply it by 1. So anytime you're multiplying by 1, you have an identity. We could then go ahead and we want to look at the inverses. And so the inverses give us the identity. So for addition, they want us to equal 0. Okay, so I might have something like -6 plus +6 equals 0. Or we might have 5 plus -5 equals 0. Okay, so we want to get 0. We want to get whatever the identity is. For multiplication, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So, for example, if I have 5, because I want to get 1, I'm going to multiply by 1/5. So the reason this works, again, if you think about it, this is like saying I have 5 over 1. So if I cross cancels, again, I'm going to end up with 1. So that's kind of where that comes from. So the identity for or the inverse of 4, then would be 1/4. Okay, because it gives us 1. The next property we have is the commutative property. And with the commutative property, you're moving the numbers. And I always think when I move, when I'm commuting to work or I'm commuting to school, I'm actually physically moving myself, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and you are rewriting the order of the problem. So it's like saying that I have, for addition, I could have 5 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 5. Okay, a little bit different than the symmetric property, because the symmetric property would say that this is what it equals. Okay, so then I can go ahead. It works for multiplication too. So if I had something like 6 times 2 is the same thing as 2 times 6. Again, it only works for multiplication and addition. It doesn't work for division and subtraction, because 6 divided by 2 is not the same thing as 2 divided by 6. The associative property is similar, except you're moving the grouping symbols. So when I think of the associative property, I think of who do I associate with? Who do I group myself with? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move my grouping symbols. So if I had something like 7 plus 3 plus 4. So my numbers are staying in the same order, but I'm just moving the grouping symbols. Because remember, by order of operations, we do the what's in parentheses first. So that's basically what it's doing. It's just changing what we're adding first. You could also do the same thing for multiplication. You could say that we have 2 times 3 times 5 is the same thing as doing the 3 times 5 first and then multiplying by 2. The nice thing about the commutative and associative property, which you might not notice, is that's really how you end up doing a lot of mental math, knowing that you can group different numbers together. So what they're going to have you do is they're going to have you not only identify properties, but they're going to have you solve a problem. They're going to give you a problem, and they're going to want you to solve it step by step and tell which property is being shown when you do that. So here's one example of them doing that. So we have 6 times 1/6 plus 5 times the quantity 12 divided by 4 minus 3. So again, we want to go ahead and we want to solve this. We're going to use our order of operations. So when I do this, I'm going to start with my parentheses. So I'm going to keep everything the same. And we're going to start working in a side of our parentheses. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. Okay, so to get there, what we did is we just substituted in a value. We substituted in what 12 divided by 4 was. So we use substitution. Then I'm going to go to the next step. And again, I'm still working within my parentheses. So I have 6 times 1/6 plus 5 times 3 minus 3 is 0. So 3 minus 3 gave us 0. That is going to be an inverse. Okay, now we're going to multiply and divide going from left to right. So 6 times 1/6, again, it gives me 1, because remember, this is like 6 over 1. We could technically multiply these both at the same time, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to multiply, and when we do that, so what we use to get the 1 is we use the inverse property. And we also use substitution here, because 5 times 0 is 0, so we use substitution. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to add these together. And if we add these together, 1 plus 0 is 1. And remember, we didn't change the number, so that is an identity. We're not going to do too many of those, but you will see something similar to that on your chapter test for this chapter.